when I bought my little house, the one with the sagging porch and the stubborn maple tree, I never imagined my internet connection would become the neighborhood's most valuable and most disputed asset. I worked remotely for a defense contractor, mostly benign systems engineering, I swear. So a reliable, low-latency fiber connection wasn't a luxury. It was how I paid my mortgage. I took pride in my setup. Buried coax to the garage, a neat patch panel, and a modem that could stream 3 UHD movies while compiling code without breaking a sweat. Of course, Karen noticed. Karen didn't just patrol the blocks for crooked mailboxes and overflowing trash cans. She patrolled signals, too, in the sense that if anything made her eye twitch, she filed it under violation. For months, she had hovered over my driveway like a fulcrum of fury. Complaints about the router antenna on my roof, the mess of a satellite dish I'd never installed, and the industrial cable guys who once trudged through my yard to fix a neighbor's connection. Each one meticulously documented on her clipboard. Then, one Monday morning, I came home to silence. Not the restful kind, but the wrong kind. No chime from my smart doorbell. No hum from the fridge alerting me I'd left the freezer open. And, most alarmingly, no internet. My phone stubbornly refused to load a single page. I figured it was an outage and pulled on a hoodie to check the junction box in the alley. The weather was clear, no storms. On the back fence, the utility access looked fine. But the last stretch of cable, my cable, the one running from the pole to the ground box outside my house, was cleanly severed. No frayed mess, no accidental nick. Someone had made sure it wouldn't limp back to life. My heart sank. I called the provider's outage number. "We show service to the neighborhood," the text said. "But your handoff is down. We'll dispatch someone." They promised a crew in the morning and left me with a temporary hotspot that was about as useful as a paper umbrella in a hurricane. Before the sun rose, there was a knock. Karen, hair in a perfect bun and eyes sharper than ever, stood on my porch like she'd staged the weather. "You should be more careful about how your cables run," she said, pointing at the ripped line as if the wire had transgressed manners. "It's unsightly." "You cut my cable?" I asked. She feigned innocence so well it could have been a Broadway audition. "Someone did something. I found it like that. I reported it to the HOA. I took photos, logged timestamps, and posted a terse message in the neighborhood app. Cable damaged. Provider notified. Do not tamper with equipment." Replies came fast. Outrage, conspiracy theories, and, oddly, a neighbor offering me a spare generator. The provider tech arrived just as I was handing a cup of coffee to the repair crew. He frowned at the cut. "This isn't accidental. That's a clean tool cut." My face flushed. "Can you fix it today?" He hesitated. "We need to check the upstream equipment. Looks fine at the exchange. But, hey, did you say you work for a defense contractor?" I admitted it. He nodded like I'd placed a sticker on my forehead reading high priority customer. "We'll expedite," he said, calling dispatch. An hour later, cars with government plates started to pull into the street. I remember thinking how surreal it was. Black sedans that made even the mail truck seem underdressed. Men and women in suits with earpieces stepped out, polite but urgent, and asked to see my ID. Someone from the cable company stayed nearby, explaining that the cut had briefly impacted a dedicated circuit used for operational communications, routed through a commercial exchange. In short, my severed cable had tripped an alarm that pinged systems monitored by a federal liaison. Karen hovered near her driveway, chin quivering with a mixture of indignation and curiosity. When one of the agents asked her a few routine questions, she gave answers in clipped sentences that, to anyone paying attention, sounded rehearsed. The agents dutifully took notes, then turned to me with the kind of measured sympathy you see in courtroom dramas. "Ma'am," an agent said, "we need to secure the scene and determine whether the damage was intentional. If so, there are federal statutes that apply to interference with critical communications." Karen's face sealed itself. For the first time in years, she looked small. The suited people asked polite, pointed questions. Where had I been the previous night? Who had access? Had I reported anyone suspicious? I provided careful, factual answers and handed over my documented timeline. Meanwhile, The repair crew ran fiber tests and kept returning to the same conclusion. This was not accidental. Within 30 minutes, a uniformed representative from the Pentagon's liaison office arrived. Not a SWAT team, not a cinematic burst of action, but official and thorough. He introduced himself, which felt almost comical next to the idea that my cable had attracted federal attention. "We're not here to alarm you," he said. "But when a commercial handoff trips alerts that involve gated communications paths, protocol requires investigation." Karen's story of discovery, how she'd found the cut and reported it, crumbled under the scrutiny of call logs and camera timestamps from the neighbor who lived across the alley, who had accidentally filmed Karen pacing at 2:12 a.m. Her alibi, once a polished prop, looked flaky. The agents interviewed her privately. I watched from a cautious distance as the HOA tyrant, clipboard now useless in her grasp, tried to recalibrate her version of events. Statements were taken. The utility company completed a chain of custody form for the severed cable. The tone in the street shifted from titters to a hush heavy with consequences. By noon, the repair was done and the connection restored. The federal team asked me to keep my logs and to forward any messages from my employer that showed the outage's effect. They explained the investigation might be administrative, fines, restitution, or criminal if intent could be proven. Whatever came next, Karen now had a record indicating she was far more than the neighborhood busybody. Word traveled fast. The HOA convened an emergency meeting where Karen, facing a stack of evidence and the cooling embers of neighborly support, found her usual podium emptied by silence. The board voted to remove her as president pending the outcome of the investigation. It was messy, human, and strangely satisfying. Later that evening, while I hooked a spare surge protector into my now humming modem, Karen stood across the street with her arms folded like a monument to indignation. I walked over, held up a coffee, and offered a small, steady voice. "Do you want to explain?" I asked. She opened her mouth and closed it again. No dignified confession came. Instead, she muttered, "I only wanted to enforce. Rules don't include cutting property," I said. "And they definitely don't include federal investigations." She looked down, defeated in a way the clipboard had never managed. The Pentagon hadn't knocked down her door with flashbangs, and she hadn't been hauled off in cuffs, but the gravity of the morning hung over her like a cloud. The neighborhood, for its part, breathed easier. Kids resumed their scooters. Someone mowed a lawn. My modem emitted a small triumphant beep. I still think about how quickly things escalated, the way a single cut cable turned a petty HOA spat into a federal inquiry. Sometimes the universe sorts out bullies in ways we don't expect. Not with melodrama, but with cold procedure and camera timestamps. As for my internet, it's never been faster. And every time I check the logs and see the healthy green heartbeat of packets flowing, I can't help but smile at the thought that the day Karen messed with my line, the Pentagon came calling, and she learned, finally, that some lines aren't hers to cross.